Studio guest here for the next few minutes, former Egg Harbor Township wrestler and I believe football player.
Yes, sir.
Nick Kosko. He's a rising sophomore at Rutgers University. Has been doing some writing here for us for Glory Days magazine the last couple of months, kind of dipping his toes into the world of journalism. He's studying that up at Rutgers. So we're going to bring him on board and talk a little bit about what's going on in his life and some of his impressions of the past high school sports year. He does a lot of follows the wrestling pretty well, and as a former wrestler, he knows a lot of these guys and has seen them wrestle this year. And it really was an outstanding year for wrestling. And he wrote a little side piece about that in our year in review issue, which is available now. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks, Dave, for having me.
No problem. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career there at Egg Harbor Township.
I played football and wrestled all 4 years of high school. I actually did play baseball for a year, but I decided that wasn't for me.
Were you a bench warmer in football?
Bench warmer? That was more baseball, actually. For football, I suffered injuries throughout football and wrestling throughout my 4 years. Especially, I missed my entire sophomore year of football.
Really?
Actually, with the knee surgery, had a benign bone tumor actually removed from my knee. So,
wow.
And then wrestling season that year wasn't really up to speed. But then junior and senior year, after recovering for a couple shoulder injuries, I got back into it and had a pretty memorable senior year.
Nice. Talk a little bit about this past high school wrestling season. I know we have a very large wrestling fan base here in Atlantic County. So many great wrestlers and teams going back to the 80s and 90s. This year in particular, a very strong year, obviously with Pat Darcy winning the state championship from Holy Spirit. What are some of the impressions you took away from the high school sports year this year, and particularly the wrestling season?
Definitely in the wrestling season, Pat Darcy and CJ Lafrago from St. Joseph, they definitely stand out. Getting Darcy getting first in the state for the first time after finishing third and second his previous 2 years.
Were you surprised at that, or do you think he was going to bring it home this year?
I definitely thought he was going to bring it home because he's been there before. He was on the big stage the previous year, and that kid works unbelievably hard, and he's one of the hardest working kids I've ever witnessed wrestle in the Atlantic County Cape Atlantic League.
Yeah, he kind of had that look in his eye in that final. I mean, I was talking to another reporter, photographer there, and I said to him, this kid's going to take it home. He's got that look in his eye. He's not going to be denied no matter what it takes. And he was going up against a great wrestler in Anthony Cephalo from Hanover Park.
Yeah, Cephalo was actually a returning state champ, so everybody was expecting Cephalo to take down Darcy once again. Darcy, but I felt by Darcy wrestling Nick Suriano from Bergen Catholic the previous year, and that kid hasn't lost a match in his high school
kid's
career.
An animal.
I felt by him wrestling him in the state final last year kind of gave him a glimpse of what he has to do in a final to be able to take home a title, and he did exactly that, and winning 4-1 in overtime. And
yeah, the impressive thing about Darcy was the way he stuck to his game plan. Talking to Coach Palone, they had a plan, and they weren't going to deviate from it unless they really had to. And it turns out, it was a tie score, so he really was able to stay with that plan. And how about that move where it looked like he was pinned? What was that move called?
I forget exactly what it was
it's
called.
Got some crazy name.
It was just some crazy name. I think maybe even Palone made it up or something. I don't know.
Maybe. But he looked like he was pinned, and he ended up getting points on that.
I definitely thought
got some back points.
I was watching the match. I definitely thought Darcy was actually getting put to his back there, and I saw the referee counting off, the 5 count for the back points, and he rewarded 3 back points. I was like, wow, I could not believe he just got turned there. Then he awarded them to Darcy.
Yeah, it was nuts. That was
nuts. I was dumbfounded in how he was able to get those points, and he ended up hanging on for the win.
As far as the wrestling season goes, what we also saw was a really cool budding rivalry, and you talked about this in your story in our year in review issue between one of your boys, Connor Augustine, over there at EHT, and Colin Roberts at Mainland in the 195 division. Looks like these two guys are going to be going at it all year next year, where they're probably going to see each other in some tournaments early on, and then obviously in the districts and regions.
Definitely, those two kids are definitely the top 2, I would say, in that weight class. If they stay that weight class going into next year, at least around in the South Jersey area. I wrestled with Connor only for 1 year. He was a freshman, I was a senior, but he did an outstanding job, and I immediately saw the potential he had.
How tough was he to handle in the room?
He's pretty tough. He kicked my butt every day, and a couple of my other teammates also had trouble with him. He's a big kid, and he's a football player and a baseball player as well. But he
He's a beast as a fullback on the football field. I mean,
yeah, you can't
you need 2 yards and a first down. Hand it to Augustino, right?
About 5 yards of carry. We usually,
yeah.
In the room, really though, you just could. For me, obviously, I'm nowhere near his skill level because he's been wrestling his whole life, and I didn't wrestle nearly as long. But the jump he took from freshman to sophomore year was unbelievable because he gets knocked out of the district 32 tournament at I believe it was 220 his sophomore year. His freshman year, excuse me, as he moved up. He was still seeded second, but he got upset on the first day, and I think he really took that as a point where he had to improve on in his sophomore campaign, and he obviously did do that.
Made it all the way to states.
He did get to the state tournament for the first time only as a sophomore, and he's got a lot more room to grow. But I think actually losing to Colin Roberts in the semifinals really propelled him to throw seeds out the window, because in the district tournament he was seeded number 1, and then Roberts comes in and pins him in the semifinals of the district tournament. And then once regions came around, Connor was
and they went back at it in the region final, which was pretty cool to see that.
It was a pretty nice run by both of them, as they were both seeded 9th and 10th respectively. And obviously Connor took to that, and he even told me that he threw seeds out the window. He felt anybody in that weight class could have won. And once he got to the final, considering he was in the home gym, the region tournament at EHT, I think everybody in the building thought that he had the edge there.
Yeah.
And he took it to him and dominated him, and he was stood at the top of the podium.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be great to see that rivalry. Talk a little bit about your experience this year. You're studying journalism. You want to get into this business. You've been doing some work for me with Glory Days magazine. How's it been going with the writing, and are you feeling more comfortable with that? And what do you like about doing that kind of thing in terms of covering high school sports?
Definitely feel more comfortable doing it. Back in high school, I wrote for my newspaper and yearbook, and really that was just small little blurbs are probably about an eighth of the size of the articles right for you.
Yeah.
And you really just get about a sentence for a quote back then for any student randomly. It's almost like you almost made it up. But getting the on-field experience out in the actual field, getting the experience now is actually really helpful, because I feel I'm ahead of the game in terms of other students that are trying to get in the same profession, and now that I have this little radio exposure, now
that you're a big radio star,
yeah, apparently
you take this back to your professors at Rutgers.
Yeah, especially that. I do plan on getting into more activities that are concerned with this field when I get back to school, especially this fall. I think me and my buddy are going to try to do. He's actually already on. It's called WRSU. It's the radio station up at school. We plan on getting, as long as we barring we pass the test, we get about an hour-long show, and we get to really talk about anything we want. We're both big sports fans.
Nice. You going to have me on as your guest up there?
Yeah, if you want to.
All right, awesome.
I can bring you on up. Advertise up there, too.
There you go. What's it like for, so many high school kids, they want to play in college, but maybe they don't have the ability to get there or whatever, but they had a nice high school career. Like yourself, was very into sports in high school. What's it like going forward in college as a non-college athlete, but as a guy who played sports and is still really into sports? What's the college experience like for you as a non-athlete? College athletics is very demanding. Some kids just don't want to put that much time in. They want to enjoy the college experience. What's it been like for you, not playing sports anymore, but still being a sports fan and kind of going through your college career as a student?
I always wanted to go to Rutgers, but then, as I got older, I realized that, because of my size and probably my skill level, I wasn't gonna reach the demands of Division I athletics, especially for football, or definitely especially for wrestling.
Yeah.
I still participate for the club team, the wrestling up there.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
I do that, but it's obviously nowhere near the demands of a Division I team, which practically, if you're a Division I athlete, you're gonna be, looked at like this is your job, and
right.
It's obviously academics always comes first, but it's you're trying to balance academics and like a full-time job, which demands so much out of you. And going up there, it really did feel very surreal and a little bit weird when I first stepped into school last fall, and I realized that I wasn't, strapping on pads, or after my class I wasn't going to go out to the football field. And,
yeah, a little different experience, right? You get done with class, it's 3 o'clock, and you got the rest of the day open.
Yeah. I'm just like, well, what do I do the rest of the day? And
playing frisbee in the quad, right?
Probably,
Stuff like that.
And just toss around a Nerf ball or something.
But there is kind of a fun life there for kids who aren't necessarily going to go on and play college sports, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, especially at Rutgers, because we're so big. I mean, that there's the fact that the school is ginormous, and if you really are a big sports fan,
you're talking 30,000 kids up there.
Yeah, especially if you're a big sports fan like myself, I mean, there's plenty to witness, because we have so many different sports teams, and plus now that Rutgers did enter the Big Ten this past year, there's so much good athletic action to watch, especially if you're into that. For me, it's football and wrestling, and I get to witness Big Ten football and wrestling. Big Ten wrestling's the upper pantheon. It's like making a comparison to the SEC for football.
Yep.
But even Big Ten football, we get to watch Ohio State, Nebraska. Penn. We get that big rivalry with Penn State, Michigan, and there's just so much amazing athletics to watch. Not even just for football and wrestling. Even basketball. There's great baseball.
Yep.
All sports. Just it's just absolutely stunning to watch the level of competition that these athletes go through and compete in that level they compete at.
Talking with Nick Kosko, former EHT student athlete who's now up at Rutgers. Real quick, got about 30 seconds left. Nick, what are you looking forward to most heading into your sophomore year at Rutgers?
Definitely, I'm starting more of the journalism classes, so I kind of get the core stuff out of the way. I actually have a class this upcoming fall. It's called Critical Issues in Sports Media. Kind of focuses on the off-the-field stuff. For example, the NFL, all the domestic violence issues, and
nice. That should be a pretty interesting course.
Yeah, it should definitely be interesting. Because, this is always what I wanted to do, and I'm gonna keep going, and hopefully it's a great experience. And I'm just gonna, time's probably gonna fly by, as I'm gonna have too much fun in class probably.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man. Thanks for joining us. Good luck next year at Rutgers.
Thanks, Dave.
And appreciate you stopping by. We're gonna take a quick break. That